You know, when you suggested I Am Legend for a deep dive, I gotta admit, I was pretty pumped.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's not exactly your typical zombie flick.
Yeah,
There's something more going on there. And that whole divide between the first and second half, we're going to get into that.
totally. It's
Uh,
almost like two different movies, right?
exactly.
What we're gonna do today is really dig into what works, what doesn't, and, the big question, why does any of that even matter?
Well, you come to the right place because honestly, when a movie gets people talking years later, it's usually got something deeper going on.
Totally. My background's in film analysis and adaptations, especially in sci-fi, always get me because they often hold up a mirror to us,
Hmm.
make us think about the bigger picture. Love that. So I Am Legend throws us right into this post-apocalyptic world virus has ravaged everything, empty streets of New York City. And we got Will Smith as Robert Neville, seemingly alone. Like you said in your notes, not vampires, but getting close.
Right.
But one thing that really struck me, you pointed this out too, we don't actually see the world collapse.
Yeah.
We get these bits and pieces of news broadcasts, these little fragments.
It's brilliant, though, isn't it? I mean, instead of just showing the chaos and the carnage head on, they
Ugh.
give us this unsettling, quiet, you're hit with this sense of absence, and it's honestly way creepier than any monster could ever be.
It's true because then your brain fills in those gaps.
Exactly.
And that leads right into what the source material really praises about those early scenes. It's that slow build of tension, right? We're not just watching Neville survive, we're in his head with him. He's experimenting, recording these messages to himself, even talking to mannequins. It's heartbreaking, honestly, but so well done.
Totally. And we expect a hero in these kinds of movies, right? Some kind of badass warrior.
Mm.
But Neville, he's a scientist. He's clinging to his routine, trying to hold on to some kind of normalcy.
Desperate for connection.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so effective. They show the psychological impact of being alone, and that's what really gets under your skin.
It's true. So you've got this eerie atmosphere, a protagonist you can connect with, and a world that's both familiar and totally alien. Then we meet the infected, the dark seekers. They call them infected in the movie,
Mm.
but they definitely have that vampire vibe.
Oh, for sure. Visually, they're really interesting. This weird blend of familiar and something totally otherworldly. The source mentions those creepy veins and everything.
Yeah, but then there's the critique that the CGI hasn't aged well.
Yeah, that's true.
They lack that weight, that physical presence that makes a monster truly scary.
That's the thing about CGI sometimes, right? Especially in horror, where practical effects just hit differently. But here's where it gets really interesting. The source keeps saying, I Am Legend is more about psychology than jump scares.
So it's more about what's going on in Neville's head than, making us scream.
Exactly. It's about making us think.
Yeah.
And maybe those slightly off dark seekers actually work in the film's favor.
How so?
Well, they feel otherworldly, almost symbolic, instead of just another monster.
Which makes me think about what you were saying earlier about sci-fi reflecting humanity back at us. If the Darkseekers aren't mindless monsters, what are they reflecting?
That's the big question, right? And the source hints at something more going on with they're
Yeah.
infected. Yeah, but is there still some kind of communication there? Maybe even emotion? That's where it gets really interesting.
Well, you think about those scenes where the Darkseekers show they're not completely mindless? Like when Neville falls into his own trap.
Oh, totally.
Hmm.
The source talks about that scene as a real turning point. It's tense, for sure,
Hmm.
but it makes you wonder, did Neville underestimate them? Could they be more strategic, more intelligent than he realizes?
Yeah.
And that leads into another big shift, the arrival of Anna and Ethan.
Right. The movie makes a hard turn there from this quiet, character-driven story to something much more action-heavy.
Yeah, and the source picks up on that too. It's jarring, for sure.
Yeah.
Suddenly, Neville's not alone, and the story becomes more about external threats, less about what's going on inside his head.
And that scene, the source points out, where Anna just happens to show up right when Neville needs saving,
A little too convenient, maybe?
feels that way.
Almost like the plot needed rescuing as much as Neville did. It's common criticism,
Yeah.
Movies start strong with a certain tone, and then they kind of lose their way. It makes you wonder, was this the studio wanting a big action climax? Or did the filmmakers just not know where else to go?
It's interesting, though, because even with the action stuff, they still throw in these moments that harken back to those earlier themes. I'm thinking about the two different endings. It's like they were trying to do two things at once, or...
Yeah, kind of. And the theatrical ending, it delivers that big Hollywood finish. Neville makes the sacrifice, saves Anna and Ethan, maybe even humanity as a whole.
Yeah.
It's satisfying in a way.
But then there's that alternate ending, the one the source keeps coming back to. Like, it's closer to what the book was trying to say.
Right, it flips everything on its head.
Yeah.
Because suddenly that Alpha Darkseeker, He recognizes Neville's captive.
You're talking about that butterfly drawn on the glass.
Exactly. Such a small detail, but it changes everything. Suggests communication, maybe even empathy on some level. Neville's not just fighting for survival anymore. He might be wiping out a whole society that's evolving in ways he can't even comprehend.
And that throws the whole legend thing out the window, right?
Totally. Is
Right.
he the hero for trying to find a cure? Or is he a monster for destroying something new, something different? Those are the questions that stick with you.
It's like what you were saying before about sci-fi making us look in the mirror. Makes you wonder who the real monsters are.
Exactly. And that's what makes I Am Legend so interesting. It's not black and white. There's no easy answers. Both endings work on some level, and which one resonates with you probably says a lot about how you see the world.
It makes you think about the choices we make, Ray. Do we prioritize our own survival, even if it means sacrificing something new, something unknown? Pretty relevant question these days.
For sure. And isn't that what great storytelling is all about? Making you think, making you question. It's not just entertainment, it's about something bigger.
Totally. So we covered a lot of ground today. Those incredibly tense early scenes, the symbolism of the Dark Seekers that shift to a more action-heavy plot, and of course those two very different endings.
But through it all, we see I Am Legend grappling with these huge questions. Survival isolation. What it means to be human when everything's gone sideways.
You wanted to deep dive into I Am Legend, and I think it's safe to say there's a lot more going on beneath the surface than just your average zombie flick.
Way more.
Next time you watch it, you might see it in a whole new light. It's about the choices we make, the stories we tell ourselves, and the legends we leave behind. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.